Glad that you, hello. How are you? My name's Joe, the other Joe, and we're glad that you're here to worship with us this morning. Before we get into worship this morning, I wanted to share a passage out of Hebrews chapter 11, which is, I don't know about you, but this time of year gets me a little bit, I begin to get excited because spring is just around the corner, right? And it's like, what does spring bring? Spring brings, all things new. It brings a whole new start. It brings, what seemed to be like endless dark and gray suddenly becomes green and bright. March 1, today is March 1, 2020. So exactly 20 years ago is when we moved here. We arrived at our new home in Trumbull March 1st in the year 2000. We came from Washington, and Washington has seasons, but it's like light rain in the summer, heavy rain in the fall, worse rain in the winter, and a whole lot of rain in the spring. And so everything around you, no matter what season you're in out there, you can see green every day, right? Some of the trees lose their leaves, but there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of fir trees that always look green. And even your lawn sometimes looks green in the wintertime. You don't mow it, but it's not brown like it is here. And so on the way here, when we caravanned across the country with one truck pulling a camp trailer and the other one pulling a stock trailer full of goats, so Ma and Pa Kettle were heading across the prairie, and as we got into Nebraska, I noticed on the side of the road, and you can still see it today, but in the wintertime on this particular, February, we were there February 28th going through. And all the trees on the side of the road, they didn't just not have leaves, but they looked black. So I told our neighbor, I wonder what happened to all these trees. They're all dead. Because all along the freeway, they looked to me like somebody should probably cut them down. Well, lo and behold, because we're in Nebraska, in spring, things change. And those trees got leaves, and all things new became really, really bright and green along the freeway. Grass turned green. It wasn't brown. I thought the lawn maybe was dead. I was going to have to replant it. So I knew nothing about seasons in that sense. And so there's something about when I look at this time of year, I get really excited here in Nebraska because things are going to change in about 3 weeks. And even yesterday, I was out listening to the geese, and then over a flock of cranes flew over. So I heard the first sound, the first chortles of the cranes. And those are things that just, maybe you've lived here all your life, but for those of us who didn't grow up here, those things are fascinating to us. So every year we go out and see the cranes. So it's like when there's seasons that actually show you a difference and can actually be totally different than the season before, to me it's a real eye-opener. And I think about, in Hebrews chapter 11 it says this. It says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things that are not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith, and this is the verse I want to concentrate on, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. We need to appreciate, I think, where we live. We don't live on some other planet. There's no other planet like ours. We need to appreciate that, and we were sharing in communion this morning as we were getting ready to come up here. It's interesting that when you try to imagine what God has done through creation, when you try to look around and see that, you appreciate what you can actually see. But your mind, when it begins to wander out into vast places like the universe or out way past the planets, you can only go so far in your thinking because we are human. We are limited in our understanding. And yet when you go that far out and then all of a sudden you come right back in to what Jesus accomplished on the cross for you and for me, then it becomes something that is extremely personal, and creation not only is a wonderful thing, but recreation is a better thing. And so when I think about spring, I think of all things new, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says this. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. So let's appreciate that when we worship this morning, and let's pray first before we do. Lord, we thank you, Father, as we contemplate and think about the wonders around us. Lord, we are so appreciative of the fact that we not only do we live here, but we can find reason and purpose for living here. And Lord, it is through your Son that that happens. And as we sing today, Father, as we worship in music, I ask, Lord, that you would be in our midst in a really special way. Invade our hearts if need be. Change us where we need to change. And help us to just awesomely worship the wonderful name of Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. Stand with me and let's worship the Lord. blood that brought me, oh, the grace that brought me to the home of God. Grace that brought me to the fold of God.
And to worship you, a mighty fortress, the rock where we should put our hope and our future in. So God, today may you worship the foundation of our faith with the person who saved us from our own demise. So God, we love you and we praise you. Amen.
I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from every fear. Those who look on him are radiant. They'll never be ashamed. They'll never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard me and saved me from my enemies. The Son of God surrounds his saints. He will deliver them. He will deliver them. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, blessed is he who hides in him. Oh, fear the Lord. Oh, all you saints. He'll give you everything. He'll give you everything. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Come exalt his name. Forever magnify the Lord with me.
Sing it.
Come exalt his name. Together glorify the Lord with me.
Let him hear you.
Come exalt his name forever. Let's pray. God, thank you for today. Let us exalt your name forever. Thank you for the changing seasons. Thank you for being constant. God, we love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Awesome music, amen. You may be seated. Well, as we continue our worship, it's always important to talk about the giving aspect, and that's something that we flash before you every Sunday. As you can see, family giving was in February was $4,300. We thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts. Our February expenses, you look and go, wow, they're $8,000. March, of course, this is the first Sunday. There are 5 Sundays. Are there 5 Sundays in March? There's 5 Mondays, I know. But so March is just beginning, and our expenses in March are a little less, close to $5,000. But we're just so thankful for you honoring the Lord, and giving is one of those things that is oftentimes talking about money can be seemingly uncomfortable, and yet it really shouldn't be. It's something when God gets a hold of our hearts and gets a hold of our pocketbooks, not only do we give here, but we also, with that same attitude then when we leave this place, we have that same attitude of giving when it comes to other needs that we see that pop up before us. And so it's an awesome thing to be a part of that program that God sets down, to be a cheerful giver, right? So our Thrive goal, not our Survive goal, our Thrive goal is to have 51 individuals giving about $38.12 a week. That's like a couple trips to McDonald's. In February, 30 individuals gave, so that's cool. And in March, of course, nobody has given, but that's okay. Today's the first Sunday in March. So it's just something that's good to flash before you, so that you know that, as a local congregation, and that God has blessed us with a building like this, we should be constantly thankful that our expenses are not even greater than they are. And so we're very pleased with that. And as you know, some of our support comes from outside, comes from those who support church plants and others, and someday we want to be able to do that same thing, to be totally self-sufficient in that sense, and then to be able to take on another ministry outside this church. But already we do, if you go to the missionary slide, we do, or to the giving, well, I'll get to that later, never mind. What is the next slide? I always forget. There it is. It was our outside giving. I wanted to be sure that was the next one. In 2020, so far in 2020, we've given over $2,000. So that's an awesome thing to give back to those different missionaries that are listed there for you to see. Also, how to give is important, and as you know, Joe reminds me constantly, you can't give out in the foyer, okay? So someday you can. You can give online. You can go to the wellhastings.com/give, and you can give there. And there are 2 ways to give in here, in the corner in the back, and on the wall in the back above the communion station there. So someday we'll have an opportunity for you to give in the foyer. That is my goal, okay? You cannot have too many places to give. But anyway, we thank you so much for your giving. As far as praying for a particular missionary today, we support Spencer and Lauren Parish in Kearney, Nebraska, which is just down the street. I haven't had the privilege to meet them. They have a child named Juliet. They're at Calvary Baptist Church in Kearney, Nebraska, and his vision and mission, the way he writes it, is to make Jesus non-ignorable in Kearney. I like the way that reads. To make Jesus non-ignorable in Kearney and to the ends of the earth. To glorify God by making joyful, passionate disciples of Jesus. So they began in 2017, so that's a fairly new plant. So we're going to pray for them this morning. I'm sure they're probably meeting right now as we are. And let's just ask the Lord to bless them in maybe a special way this morning. Father, we thank you, Lord, for the parishes. We thank you for the church, Father, Calvary Baptist Church in Kearney. We thank you, Lord, that plant there is going to be able to reach hopefully many, many, many people in that area. That, Father, wherever we plant a church, wherever you set one up, there are many, many, many who do not know you. And so we ask for those around that church, Father, that are there this morning, first of all, that they would have a great worship time together, that they would listen to your word intently, that, Father, it would be something that changes their lives. And then as they go out into that community, Lord, I pray that they would be able to face one-on-one, face-to-face, deal with people, as we all do, to see them come to the Lord. We thank you, Father, for this age that we live in, Lord. It can be difficult. It can be confusing. It can be heartbreaking sometimes. It can be challenging. And yet, Father, you can take all of those things, and as we apply Jesus to them, we can find solutions to them. So I ask you, Father, for that ministry there, that you would bless it and bless our service today in Jesus' name. Amen. There is no kids' church today, so little ones, you get to stay and be with the rest of us. And you will be able to take 3 minutes to go around, and I want you to greet at least 3 people and find out what kind of a week they had this week, okay? So take 3 minutes, and after 3 minutes, Pastor will come and share from the Word. So on. 3 minutes is going now.
Lord, with you. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. I invite you to find your seats real quick. And if you've got a Bible on you, grab your Bible, please, and turn to the book of Joshua, chapter 22 is where we're at this week. We've been in Joshua now for a number of months with a couple of breaks in there for a few other series. But we're coming down to the end of Joshua as we look at chapter 22. And I am eagerly anticipating being in this chapter with y'all this morning. So I'm just going to dive right into it. Joshua 22, let me invite you guys to stand. I hope you've had enough time to find it in your Bibles. I want you to follow along with me. Text will be on the screen for you as well if you don't have a Bible. If you don't have a Bible and you would like one, let me know. We'll get you one. To Joshua 22, beginning in verse 1. At that time, Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice and all that I have commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days down to this day, but have been careful to keep the charge of the Lord your God. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers, as he promised them. Therefore turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. Only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to keep his commandments, and to cling to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." So Joshua blessed them, sent them away, and they went to their tents. Now to the one half of the tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given a possession in Bashan, but to the other half, Joshua had given a possession beside their brothers in the land west of the Jordan. And when Joshua sent them away to their homes and blessed them, he said to them, "Go back to your tents with much wealth, very much wealth, and with very much livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and with much clothing. Divide the spoil of your enemies with your brothers." So the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh returned home, parting from the people of Israel at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Gilead, their own land of which they had possessed themselves by command of the Lord through Moses. And when they came to the region of the Jordan that is in the land of Canaan, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, an altar of imposing size. And the people of Israel heard it said, "Behold, the people of Reuben, people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built the altar at the frontier of the land of Canaan in the region about the Jordan on the side that belongs to the people of Israel." And when the people of Israel heard of it, the whole assembly of the people of Israel gathered at Shiloh to make war against them. Then the people of Israel sent to the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, and with him 10 chiefs, one from each of the tribal families of Israel, every one of them the head of a family among the clans of Israel. And they came to the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead, and they said to them, "Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what is this breach of faith that you have committed against the God of Israel in turning away this day from following the Lord by building yourselves an altar this day in rebellion against the Lord? Have we not had enough of the sin at Peor, from which even yet we have not cleansed ourselves, and for which there came a plague upon the congregation of the Lord, that you too must turn away this day from following the Lord? And if you too rebel against the Lord today, then tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. But now if the land of your possession is unclean, pass over into the Lord's land, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and take for yourselves a possession among us. Only do not rebel against the Lord or make us as rebels, by building for yourselves an altar other than the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan, the son of Zerah, break faith in the matter of the devoted things, and wrath fell upon all the congregation of Israel? And he did not perish alone for his iniquity. Then the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh said in answer to the heads of the families of Israel, the mighty one, God, the Lord, the mighty one, God, the Lord, he knows, and let Israel itself know. If it was in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, do not spare us today for building an altar to turn away from following the Lord. Or, if we did so to offer burnt offerings or grain offerings or peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself take vengeance. No, we did it from fear that in time to come your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you people of Reuben and people of Gad. You have no portion in the Lord. So your children might say to our children, might make our children cease to worship the Lord. And therefore we said, let us now build an altar not for burnt offerings nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you and between our generations after us, that we do perform the service of the Lord in his presence with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings. So your children will not say to our children in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. And we thought, if this should be said to us or to our descendants in time to come, we should say, behold, the copy of the altar of the Lord, which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn away this day from following the Lord by building an altar for burnt offering, grain offering, or sacrifice, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before the tabernacle. When Phinehas the priest and the chiefs of the congregation, the heads of the families of Israel who were with him, heard the words that the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the people of Manasseh spoke, it was good in their eyes. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, said to the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the people of Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is in our midst because you have not committed this breach of faith against the Lord. Now you have delivered the people of Israel from the hand of the Lord. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the chiefs, returned from the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the land of Gilead to the land of Canaan, the people of Israel, and brought back word to them. And the report was good in the eyes of the people of Israel. And the people of Israel blessed God and spoke no more of making war against them to destroy the land where the people of Reuben and the people of Gad were settled. The people of Reuben and the people of Gad called the altar witness. For, they said, it is a witness between us that the Lord is God. This is the word of the Lord to us this morning. I'll pray for us. As I pray, would you pray also? Father, stand before you this morning and before your church with your word open, in trembling and fear. And Father, I pray that you would create that same kind of trembling and fear in our hearts any time that we open your word. And I pray, Father, that you would come and speak now to each of us in this room by the power of your Spirit. I pray, God, that you would speak into the broken places and the pride-filled places and the hurting places of our hearts. Help us to become a people who love you with our lives. I pray, God, that you would, in the midst of all of this, turn our attention to the cross of Christ and the empty tomb of Christ and the promise of heaven for those who have trusted in him. Trust you to do this work and then some. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. In the context of the book of Joshua, pause there for a moment. Context is a very important dynamic of interpreting the scriptures. So in the context of the book of Joshua, we have the nation of Israel entering into the promised land, conquering her enemies, taking possession of the land, even though she never fully possesses the full inheritance of the land. Now, in this passage and in the last 3 chapters, really, we have a collection of farewell messages. Farewell to the west side tribes in this chapter, farewell to the east side in the next one, and then farewell to Joshua and the whole book in the last chapter. So that's where we're at the last 3 weeks. It's the last portion of the book. And in this chapter, what we have is the first hints. Not really the first hints, probably not the best. Anyways, we have hints of disunity and conflict that begin to surface as the nation of Israel settles into the land. And you might have noticed that the conflict itself is centered on what appears to be very biblical reasons. Context is important. One of the first rules of biblical interpretation is that there's 3 circles of context. There's the immediate context of the chapter and verse that you're reading in that section. Second level of context is basically kind of the book and the genre of writing. The third level of context is the entire Bible. Before you begin to make an interpretive declaration from the text, you've got to look at those contexts first. If you don't do that, you rip passages out of context and you try to support some ideology or belief system that you bought into. It's called proof texting. Church is really good at it. Well-meaning Christians have been doing this for a long time. So I start with context because that is the first place you start. Oftentimes we don't do the hard work of biblical interpretation. Oftentimes we kind of put a veil over the reason why we don't do good biblical interpretation as Christians. We'll say, I'm not very good at that. When in reality, I don't want to take the time to do that. So it's a veiled confession that covers up the sin in my heart. And I want to protect us against that. Love God's word. If something arises within me whenever I see someone ripping a passage out of context. And so my hope every Sunday morning is to put this on display for you in the way that I communicate. I hope that that would be what happens this morning. Because once again, the context seems to dictate that there is a massive conflict happening in the text between the people of Israel. And the reason for the conflict appears to be 2 sides that would claim to have very biblical reasons for the war that they are making with each other. I'm making that statement up front, and I'm asking you to go ahead and test me, as you should every Sunday, by being good Bereans, even though we're Baptists. And it's a reference to the book of Acts when the Bereans tested everything that Paul said. So please test what I say by the context. Let the context of the passage make the point, and make sure that the point that I make is actually the point of the text. When you get that backwards, you have wholesale ripping apart of the scriptures and their intended meaning, oftentimes for good reasons. And what happens is you wind up with heresy. So with that in mind, take a look at the text. First thing we see, West Side tribes return home. I think you might agree with me. The West Side tribes return home in the first 9 verses. What Joshua does is he gathers the Reubenites, he gathers the Gadites, he gathers the half-tribe of Manasseh together. They are the West Side tribes. I don't know what the West Side sign is, but they're the West Side, right? Okay? So you've got the West Side tribes, he gathers them together, and he prepares to send them home. He affirms their commitment. He affirms their obedience to the Lord. He affirms their obedience to his own leadership of them. They simply did not sit at home on the west side of the Jordan on their thumbs while their brothers and their sisters fought for their land on the east side of the Jordan. That's what's happening. First few verses. And before sending them off, Joshua blesses them after he instructs them to do what? To love God, to obey God's commands, to cling to God, to serve God with their entire beings. That's a major theme in the scriptures, that commandment. So it's not an implication of the text, it's actually an explicit directive of the text. As Joshua sends off those 2.5 West Side tribes, he also instructs them to do what? Divide the spoils of war among themselves as they resettle in the land that they had conquered earlier, according to the command of the Lord under Moses' leadership. Is that an implication for us that we should go divide the spoils of war? No. That would be ripping a text out of context. Agree? We might disagree. We should talk afterwards if we do. Okay? So I think this had to have been an exciting moment for these West Side tribes as they return home with these instructions to love God, obey God, cling to God, and serve God wholeheartedly. So it seems to me out of these first 9 verses that the meaning of that portion of the text is simply that loving God, obeying God, clinging to God, serving God wholeheartedly, that's a very serious matter for God's people. What it seems like in terms of meaning. We've often used the illustration that if I wrote a letter to my wife that was intended to say, I love you, and someone took that letter and proof texted it like we often like to do with the Bible, and maybe in that letter I also wrote something that was personal between us and our relationship that talks about maybe some conflict and argument that we had. And somebody took that little chunk out of there, and then he used that to prove the point that I, in fact, hated my wife. Now, that would bring dishonor to the intended meaning of the text, and also dishonor to the author of the text. Agreed? This is what happens when we misapply, misinterpret, rip things out of context. This is a heavy theme for me this week. Second thing we see in the text is the conflict begins in verses 10 through 20. In those 10 verses, the 2.5 West Side tribes, they build a massive altar on the east side of the Jordan River. It wasn't built on their side, the west side of the river. It was built on the other side, the east side of the river, in the land that belonged to the east side tribes. So when the east side tribes hear the news, what do? They gather together to make war against their brothers in the west. Crazy how God's people would do this, isn't it? In some regard, both sides holding Bibles in their hands, going to war with each other. How does this happen? So here we have an early account of the civil wars that are going to soon erupt among God's people in the Promised Land, albeit for much worse reasons down the road. But the 9.5 tribes, those east side tribes, they send 10 delegates under the leadership of a dude named Phinehas. Love the name. They send them to confront the 2.5 west side tribes. Now, personally, as I'm studying the text, reading it, I can feel the tension building. Right? The tension builder. This is a Braveheart moment in a movie, isn't it? Right? Braveheart. I like Braveheart. Particularly like his sword. I have one in my office. Phineas also had a brother named Ferb. Okay. That would be an argument from silence in terms of biblical interpretation, because we don't know if he had a brother or not. But I'm not going to waste our time any longer. It's platypus. I don't know where the platypus is at. Probably a quiver for some arrows. So personally, as I'm looking at this, I can feel the tension building as this 11-leader war council, I would call it. They march toward the west side tribes. They're armed for confrontation. Agreed? They're ready to go. This is a holy war at its best in the text. Agreed? And really at this point in the story, I realize we read the whole text, so it's a little different for us because we're looking backwards on it. But at this point in the text, and the way that the narrator is telling the story, you don't really understand why. Like, all you really know is, man, I can build a pile of rocks. Who gives a rip, right? But these 9.5 tribes, they got something in a wad, and they're upset about it. You get to verses 16 through 20, you kind of begin to see things a little bit more clearly. Think about Phinehas. I love this guy. Phinehas is the leader of the 11. I think Phinehas is most likely their spokesperson, in my understanding from my study. Just got to ask the question, who is this Phinehas guy? Who is he? Where did he come from? Right? I love Phinehas. I love the heavy metal band named Phinehas too. So, who is Phinehas? Why did the East Side tribes choose him to lead their war council? These are questions of interpretation. You don't just read these passages for 5 minutes and then set it down and then go back about your day. These are questions we all should ask, right? Who is Phinehas? Why'd they choose him? Here's the thing. Phinehas was a godly, a passionate, fearless leader. He took God's commands about holiness and obedience very seriously. You should test out what I'm saying to you. You should not sit there nodding your heads like bobblehead dolls, right? You should not trust it just because I make the big bucks and I don't have any credentials. But you should not just do that. You should go do the work yourself. You're Christians. Those of you who are Christians and you have Bibles. Challenging you. Don't only do it with me, do this with anybody who opens the Bible in front of you and ensure that what you are hearing is true. Because a lot of things have been done in the name of truth that have this little bit of falsehood in them. And Christians for generations, going all the way back to here, have been known to be sitting there on their lazy little thumbs, nodding their heads. The lack of power in the church today because we don't study our Bibles for all it's worth. So you got Phinehas, godly, passionate, fearless leader. He took God's commands about holiness and obedience very seriously, so much so, listen to this, here's Phinehas. He took this so seriously that back in the wilderness of wandering, Numbers chapter 25 for your reference, back in the wilderness of wandering, he used his spear. He's a pastor, and he carried a spear. I don't know why, but I think it's cool. He carried a spear. And what he does next blows my mind. And I don't think you should make a case for church discipline on this at all. I think that would be a prostitution of the Scriptures. This happens one time, but it's still very interesting. Takes his spear, kills 2 professing believers. with his spear. Not unbelievers out there in the big old bad world, people that we're at war against out there. Actually kills 2 professing believers, believers in the church, so to speak. Why? Because they were having sex next to the tabernacle, or possibly inside the tabernacle, depending upon your perspective of the text. And it's okay to have a disagreement there and not divide and make war with each other. But it's one of those 2 places. Either way, he's filled full of righteous indignation. Now, the tabernacle, you need to understand, was a modern-day mobile church building. They had a massive team that did set up and tear down with this thing in the wilderness as they moved around. So all of y'all that have been with us for a long time remember the days of set up and tear down, might remember those days of tabernacling for us. So Phinehas seems to be the right man to lead this war council, and his questions that he asks of the West Side tribes, they kind of make it obvious that he believes, mistakenly, as we're going to see in a moment, no matter how righteous and good and godly and passionate this man is, he still can be mistaken. He believes that the West Side tribes are breaking God's commands regarding worship. You can reference that in Deuteronomy chapter 12. He also believes that they're committing the same sin that he confronted back in the wilderness with the professing believers who were having sex in or next to the church building. This is the sin of Peor in the text. Go to Numbers 25, check it out, as well as the sin that was dealt with earlier in Joshua with Achan, who kept items that were designed for destruction. Go back to Joshua 7, test that. Context, context, context. So the East Side tribes under Phinehas's leadership are super concerned about what? Obedience to God and holiness at the personal level as well as the corporate level. So, out of this second portion, it seems like a good meaning of this text would be that personal and corporate holiness is a very serious matter for God's people. Look at the third section of the text, verses 21 through 29. In that section, you see the West Side tribes responding to the conflict. People of Reuben, people of Gad, people of half tribe of Manasseh, they respond to the East Side tribe's accusation. That's what we do. Someone disagrees with us, or someone does something that doesn't make any sense to us, we accuse them of things, don't we? What our minds do. So they respond to the East Side tribe's accusation of disobedience, the accusation of rebellion, the accusation of unfaithfulness, the accusation of sin. And they respond to that by affirming that they actually do love the Lord. Hey, you're accusing me of this, but I actually do love the Lord. And they respond by saying that the Lord knows their hearts. One of the primary interesting aspects of walking through conflict is being able to confess that, you know what, the Lord knows my heart, and you are not God. And the Lord knows your heart, and I am not God. But a lot of times we want to be the Holy Spirit in someone else's life, and we want to tell them why they did what they did. That's called assuming motivation. That's dangerous. That's called manipulation. So, they affirm that they love the Lord. The Lord knows their hearts. If these accusations are true, they say, then they really shouldn't be spared. The Lord should have his vengeance upon them, they say. So they essentially affirm this, okay? They affirm that if their opponents' accusations are actually true, then their opponents are right in seeking godly justice. They affirm that. And then they go on to say that their opponents have actually judged them wrongfully, though. They're not rebelling. Though it may appear on the outside that way, they're not rebelling. They merely want to make sure that future generations know that even though there's a massive river dividing them, that they do serve the Lord just as their brothers in the East do. In other words, the massive altar they've built is not for literal sacrifices. It's not meant to undermine the importance of the actual altar in the East. It's only a copy that is meant to be a witness or a reminder of who they love, who they obey, who they cling to, and who they serve. That's what it's meant for. It seems like reputation a witness of reputation is a very important matter for God's people too. The fourth thing we see in the text is verses 30 through 34, when we see the conflict resolved. Phinehas and his 10 leaders from the east side tribes, they backed down from their holy war. Why? Because they realized that their previous accusations against their brothers, rightly founded as they appeared, were actually unjustified. They're unjustified in light of the west side tribe's explanation. They're not rebelling against the Lord, therefore they are not in danger of God's judgment as it previously appeared. So Phinehas, man of integrity that he is, this is a point that fascinates me because oftentimes in modern day conflict, rather than admitting that my assumptions were wrong and then retreating, we actually try to find things that that person says that somehow support our predetermined judgments about them. Phinehas doesn't do that. Phinehas is a leader of integrity. He leads his war council back to the rest of Israel, and they give an honest account of what the west side tribes actually explained to them. And I pause there for a moment and can't tell you how many times I have sat in front of others and explained my intentions and my reasons to only then be mischaracterized the very next day. And I'm sure that you all have experienced that as well. Painful. Very painful. Phinehas does a very good job. It's an honest account. And all of Israel found the report to be good, so they stopped talking about making war. Final note that we see here in these verses is the 2.5 west side tribes naming the altar witness. 4, they said, it is a witness between us that the Lord is God. In other words, the conflict is resolved. The massive altar is now a physical witness between the west side and the east side, declaring that the Lord is God. So it seems like lordship is a very important matter for God's people. Done a lot of contextual work here. Dug into the context quite a bit, right? We've kind of done some circles of context. I think you've seen that as we've kind of spread that out to other passages. Question now becomes what? How do I feel about the text? Could be, how do I feel about the preacher who's preaching the text? Can I just say that's I don't know that that's really in there. We do have a tendency to judge preaching based on the way that the preacher makes us feel, rather than judging it based on the content being delivered, whether the content itself is faithful or not. I also think that when we go to the scriptures and we study on our own, we oftentimes read those scriptures through the lens of the voice of our favorite content deliverer, whoever that may be for you. And I think it's hard work for us, for me too, to strip away those voices, faithful as they may be, and lean into relationship with the Holy Spirit and say, okay, Spirit, I need you to come, and I need you to make a gospel application to my heart in the places that I am wrestling and struggling that are faithful to the meaning of the text. So, spent a lot of time doing that this week. I wish I could explain to you all of the different places of conflict that I've gotten to experience this week. Can't, because we don't have time. Plain and simple. It's been a week. I didn't finish this message until about 11:30 last night. I had it written 3 different times. It's changed directions 3 different times. The core meaning of the text, I think, has stayed the same, but my heart being prepared to say what I think I'm to say, not so much. How does the gospel apply to what we've just read? You'll see these questions on the next screen. As we just learned that loving God, holiness, reputation, lordship, these are very important topics for God's people to wrestle with. We've also witnessed in the text how conflict can easily erupt within a group of people who are attempting to live out those 4 things. Conflict is a very real thing in our world. I actually, at one point, had this message written around an application of 10 Commandments of conflict resolution. Implied in the text, I think. Probably would have been a gross misapplication of the text, I think, so I don't think it was written for that purpose. Not that you couldn't learn some good things about resolving conflict from it, but the reality is conflict is a very real thing. There isn't a family or a nation that hasn't been touched by conflict since the beginning. You turn on any news channel today for about 30 seconds. Read any newspaper, I think you find it full of conflict. So the question became for me is, how can I help us not feel good about ourselves, not feel overly bad about ourselves, but how can I help us feel what's happening in the text? How can I help us experience what's happening in the text? Because that's an important aspect for us, to get our hearts, our emotions, and our feelings, our desires to connect with what's happening in the text, right? Because oftentimes you read the words and it just feels cold. So, how can I help us to feel the same sense of conflict in this text that the players in this text felt? Now, obviously, a few of us could go grab swords and we could line up on either side from each other, right, and start yelling at each other and do that. We're not going to do that. How can I intentionally, in some regard, antagonize us to feel the urgency, to feel the fear, to feel the anger and the hatred in this text? Maybe even to feel the sweet release of the resolution of the conflict. How can I help us to feel that so that we might grasp what's happening here? I'm going to do that by talking about the church in America from my perspective for a minute. I would imagine that all of you will feel some kind of conflict with what I'm about to say. I don't imagine that I'm going to get crucified out front after preaching. Heard that from Randy Madison one time when he preached his final series at E-Free, when he talked about preaching through Revelation. I was fearful each week that might be what happened. Because in some regard, he was confronting different ideologies and theologies that had crept into the church. So many of you, when I say I'm going to talk about my perspective of the American church for a moment, you already feel conflicted. So please take a deep breath. Please try to hear my heart as I remember that my job is not to tickle ears. My job is not to tickle ears with modern day, so-called, evangelical, easy messages of beliefism. My job is to help us as a church get to a place where we cry out in desperation for the power of the gospel. That is my one and only aim. It was the aim that the Apostle Paul had, so I feel as though I'm in good company. When I survey the church, especially in America today, I see a subculture of people who are shackled in the chains of conflict on a very bloody battlefield of war between the so-called conservative right and the so-called liberal left. I don't understand how people who claim to be Christians, who claim to study the Word of God, claim to study the Scriptures, could on the one side of this battlefield protest abortion vehemently, but not give the same amount of energy to protesting our president's sinful words and behaviors. I don't understand. Some of our leading Christian voices have hailed him as a Christian. On the other side of the battlefield are people that I don't understand equally. They claim to be Christian too. They claim to study their scriptures too. They protest the president's sinful actions and words, but they give a pass to people who love to kill babies. And they openly accept just about any kind of sin as though it's okay, as though it's normal. And I think all of this makes every one of us look really foolish. When the Bible uses the word fool, when you look at Jesus, who was he talking to? Not the big battle world out there. He was talking to his own people. The religious people of his day would say, you are fools. That's the context for using the word, mostly. So, we need to be careful about the context of how we use our words in and out of the church. Makes us look foolish and hypocritical. Some people would argue that the reason that this is all happening is because the postmodern mindset has infected our nation. That's one camp. Another camp would argue that this is happening because the modern mindset hasn't completely been eradicated. That's another camp. Another camp of people would argue that secularism has infiltrated our country. Another camp would argue that millennials have ruined everything. I don't know. You know? Funny thing is that I have heard all of these arguments and more from what appears to be well-meaning, Bible-believing, to use the words of the world outside of our church, Bible-thumping would be what's indicted against us, right? Self-proclaimed Christians who have proof texts to support all their points ripped out of context oftentimes. The problem is that most of us sit in this room and we don't think that this could happen to us. We just don't believe it. We think that the people across town who are worshiping in the so-called cult, they lost it, but we didn't. Thank God for our righteousness. While never knowing that we could be whitewashed tombs. Could be. This is the state of the church today. If my assessment is anywhere close to true at the national or maybe even the global level, then I want you to imagine how that would affect entire denominations. Imagine how that would affect local churches. Imagine how this affects families. Imagine how this affects individuals. And the thing that I realized as I wrote this part last night is how we wonder why the divorce rates in the church mirror that of the world around us. Picture I see of the church in America especially is an all-out ideological war that is oftentimes devoid of the gospel. I think that we have traded the power of the gospel for a political party on either side of the aisle, along with a mindset that says that it's okay to compromise so long as we are only compromising on our perspective of the lesser of two evils. Heaven forbid. If anyone else holds to a different interpretation of what the lesser of two evils actually is. Because at that point, when someone challenges our presuppositions of what the lesser of two evils is, what do we have? You have grounds for an all-out assault. I think this is the state of the American church today. And I don't want us to live there. I personally believe that we would do well if we just simply slowed down a little bit. In all of our wars, that we rage against all things that appear to be ungodly and unholy. I really do believe that we would do well if we began to get a gospel-centered worldview. I really do. Again, my intent was to help us feel what was happening in this text. The hatred, the anger, the fear, the disgust, right? The sense of that conflict, to help us feel that based around two groups that hold Bibles in their hands. That was my intent. My last aim here as I wrap it up is to argue a minute for a gospel-centered worldview. I'm not talking about a biblical worldview that has been salt and peppered with a conservative or a liberal language or leaning. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a biblical worldview that has been saturated in the gospel. That's something I want to argue for from the scriptures. I'm talking about a gospel-centered worldview that is grounded in the message of the cross, saturated in the message of a bloody cross, saturated in the message of an empty tomb, saturated in a message of the hope of heaven as our source of strength. Now, I'm not a very courageous man. You have all heard me at times confessing my fear. I don't think I would have done as well as Phineas. If I was in the shoes of the 2.5 West Side tribes, I probably would have felt very weak in my knees as I looked into the eyes of my brothers from across the river. I can't imagine what it might have felt like in this text to have been outnumbered by the 9.5 tribes to 2.5. That's a scary moment to be that outnumbered, I think. I don't know how I would have reacted or responded to that conflict, but I do know this. I know that we serve a better Joshua. I know that a better Joshua has promised us a better inheritance. I know that he has called us to a better obedience in the gospel. I know that Jesus is a better Savior. I know that he has promised us a better heaven than we could ever experience here in any kingdom on this earth. Now, I don't know what kingdom you're in today that is being tossed back and forth on a battlefield of conflict. Kingdom seems to be a big piece of what's happening here. Kingdom of Israel is being established in a place, in a land. I don't know what kingdom it is for you. It's getting ripped up with conflict. Might be the kingdom of your marriage. Might be the kingdom of your family. Might be the kingdom of some friendship. The kingdom of singleness. Might be the kingdom of your workplace. Either way, the kingdom of heaven has been manifested on this earth through the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Because of Christ, we can openly confess our own sins as well as the sins of our nation, which I wish we would do more often. Like Nehemiah. We can beg Jesus for forgiveness. We can beg him for restoration. We can beg him for fortitude. We can beg him for integrity as we submit our lives in faith-filled trust in his work at the cross and the empty tomb. We can trust the Holy Spirit as our helper, our counselor, and our advocate to lead us into the truth. The Spirit's job. It is through Jesus, our Lord, who is God, that we can find any rest and any assurance for a better kingdom than any of the kingdoms of this earth. So my final word to us is that we can trust in the power of the Spirit to enable us to love God, to love people who are on the other side of the river from us. I don't know who it is that's on the other side of the river for you today. When it comes to loving the them in this world, the name of our church should say it all. The original vision from when we planted the well was to be a church that would connect with the thems of this world. What would happen and what would it be like next week? We all walked in. There were a bunch of women here that were scantily dressed because somebody in our church started a ministry to the strip club over on Highway 6. What would the response be from us? I mean, just be honest. How much self-righteousness would well up inside of you? Can't believe they're here. They put some clothes on. My husband might see that. I mean, What if you came in next week, a young man that I met yesterday who is a bisexual, has a beautiful voice, sang a half a worship song for us in our living room. It would be like if he walked in next week and I asked him to sing that song for us. What would you do? I fear that what you would do, I know what my own heart does sometimes when faced with these things. Pray for us. Father, please let us be a church that loves the people that are across the river from us. In Jesus' name, amen. As we take communion today, I want to remind you that you were once an orphan. You once were no different than the woman at the well. And you once had no place to call home and no family because of your sin. You once were a foreigner trying to get into a foreign land when the door wasn't closed to you. These implications of the gospel move me and motivate me because the blood of Christ was poured out so that orphans, sinners, outcasts, and those people out there, those fools, could come, be part of a family that loves them, welcomes them, and seeks their transformation. Engage today with us. Please remember that. It's the blood of Christ and the broken body of Christ that allows you to be part of. Don't let God search your heart for whatever sin may be there that you need to confess and repent of. 4 stations, 3 across the front, 1 in the back under the big clock. One on your right, 1 on your left. There'll be people there. 1 under the big clock, there'll be somebody there too to pray with you. 1 in the center here, you can come alone. You can kneel down at the bench and pray. If you're not a believer, don't take communion because it would be pretending. I don't want you to pretend. Today could be that day when you first started believing, recognized your sin, started trusting in Jesus. This is that day. Come to one of those stations where somebody is there so we can pray for you. Pray that you would find rest and assurance at the foot of the cross and the doorway of the empty tomb. Amen? Stand.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies. All my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me.
Love has called my name. I've been born again to a family, and blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Whoa, 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 whoa. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. You drowned my fears in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God. There's a place where mercy reigns, never dies. There's a place where streams of grace, deep and wide. All the love I've ever found, like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. When your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus. There's a place where sin and shame, power has peace with God and forgiveness. All the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. When your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. Here, my hope is found. Here, on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here, arms open wide. Here, you save my life. Here I bow down. Here I bow at the cross. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Savior of the world. Your love ran red. Your love ran red. What love could remember no wrongs we have done? Omniscient, all-knowing, he counts not their sum. Thrown into a sea without bottom or shore. Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. Praise the Lord, his mercy is more. Stronger than darkness, new every morn. Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. What patience would wait as we constantly roam? What father so tender is calling us home? We welcomes the weakest, the vilest, the poor. Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. Praise the Lord, his mercy is more. Stronger than darkness, new every morn. Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. What riches of kindness he lavished on us. His blood was the payment, his life was the cost. He stood 'neath the debt we could never afford. Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. Praise the Lord, His mercy is more, stronger than darkness, new every morn. Our sins, they are many, His mercy. Praise the Lord. His mercy is more, stronger than darkness, new every morn. Our sins, they are many, His mercy is more. One more time. Praise the Lord. His mercy is more, stronger than darkness, new every morn. Our sins, they are many, His mercy is more.
Is to be reminded that regardless of the darkness, regardless of our sin, and regardless of the sins of our nation even, at the end of the day we can trust that God's mercy is more. Amen? As you go this week, remember there's gospel communities that I wholeheartedly affirm that you ought to be in. So please try to find one and get there. Sheet out there that has some of those outlines. So love you guys a whole bunch. Pray that God blesses you as you go. Amen.